This is KGW News at noon.
On this vote, the yeas are 53, the nays are 47, and this nomination is confirmed.
There you hear Senate members celebrating today after their votes were tallied for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination to the Supreme Court. Welcome to the News at Noon. I'm Drew Carney. Judge Jackson not only becomes the newest member of the Supreme Court, she's also the first black female judge to join the country's highest court. Jackson won approval today with a Senate vote of 53 to 47. All right, let's get to one of our top local stories this afternoon. It's day 4 of the Nancy Crampton Brophy trial. She's the romance novelist accused of shooting and killing her husband, Daniel Brophy. Daniel was an instructor at the Oregon Culinary Institute, and that's where his body was found back in June of 2018. Earlier today, one of Daniel's co-workers took the stand.
You mentioned earlier that you were surprised that Dan owned a gun. Was that something you learned from Mr. Brophy himself?
Negative. He never mentioned, I never heard that word come out of his mouth, if I'm not mistaken.
Do you recall any conversation?
So Daniel's parents are expected to take the stand later today. His mom was already on the stand once before this week. And we are live streaming this trial right now, so you can watch it on either KGW.com or on our KGW YouTube page. All right, let's get you up to speed now on a few more local headlines, starting with a car that had 5 people inside it that was shot at along Highway 26. So the people in the car told police those shots came from a silver SUV that pulled right up next to them. None of those 5 people in the car were actually shot, though. All 5 avoided any serious injuries. Some of them were hit with broken glass. This shooting happened last night, just after 6 o'clock. And again, this was on Highway 26 near Cornelius Pass Road. Authorities are still looking for the person or people responsible. There was another shooting last night, this one at about 9:30 at Roosevelt High School. The person who was shot was taken to the hospital, but they are expected to recover. The investigation into what exactly happened with this shooting still is going on right now, but students at Roosevelt were able to go back to class today. And the search continues for a missing snowboarder up on Mount Hood. Search and rescue crews were back out today looking for 30-year-old Ryan Mather, who was reported missing on Tuesday. Crews are searching today at Mount Hood Meadows in the area that's accessed from the Shooting Star chairlift. And that again is a look at some of our headlines on this Thursday. Right now we want to take a look at the forecast for the first time here at noon. Joe Ranieri joins us from the KGW Weather Center.
Well, we're still on track to see one of the best days we've seen so far this year. In fact, we are on track to see the warmest day of the year. I'm forecasting daytime highs getting very close to 80 degrees. So here's where we'll be later on today. You can see by noon, temperatures in the mid to the upper 60s. Heading in the later part of the afternoon, up and down the I-5 corridor, we'll be seeing temperatures right around that 75, 77, maybe even 78 degrees. In fact, I am forecasting a high of 78 degrees. And then after sunset, we'll start to see some changes move on shore. As we look at the futurecast, this is what you'll be running into throughout parts of the evening hours as those clouds move through. We'll be seeing dry conditions all day today, but after midnight, we'll be seeing some showers return, and there's a slight chance to see some thunderstorms develop heading into tomorrow. I'll talk more about your weekend forecast in just a few minutes.
All right, now let's get back to some of our other local headlines. Every year, we know Oregon garnishes millions in tax refunds to collect old unpaid parking tickets and court fees. But a brand new KGW investigation found that program unfairly impacts poor people and minority communities. For most people, you get a parking ticket, you just pay it off. But for a lot of people, especially those on a limited or fixed income, it's not that easy. When those tickets or fees go unpaid, the government tacks on more fees, sometimes hundreds of dollars worth. Let's take Chris Baum, for example. He got 3 parking tickets 14 years ago. He says he doesn't even remember getting those tickets, but he wanted to settle things up. So he set up a payment plan to avoid losing a big chunk of his tax return.
The economy for working people like me, I mean, more than 50% of the population can't afford a $400 emergency. And now I have almost $800 worth of parking tickets that I got 14 years ago. That doesn't seem right.
Here in Oregon, those fines don't come off the books for 20 years. The Oregon Judicial Department collects roughly $8 million from taxpayers each year. You can find more on this full investigation from Kyle right now on our website, KGW.com. Next up here at noon, we're talking about homelessness and some possible solutions. Portland, for example, is building tiny home villages, but we're asking, how well do those types of shelters actually work? On the story, Pat Doris learned what researchers found out when they surveyed both village residents and their neighbors.
The general concept is an outdoor site with a set of tiny homes for secure individual storage and sleeping quarters. They would be clustered around a shared central facility with restrooms and other services. The city already has some, but Commissioner Dan Ryan has promised to build 6 more. They were supposed to open last year, which did not happen, so we'll see if they actually get around to it. In the meantime, Portland State University just released a big study on how effective these villages are. One of the biggest takeaways is that people living in the villages tend to be fairly happy with the model. 86% said they are satisfied or very satisfied with their pod as a place to live, and a large majority said they were satisfied with their villages and neighborhoods. But wherever a shelter like this opens up, we always hear from the neighbors who are concerned, understandably, about living so close to them. So here's what the researchers found with that.
One of the top concerns that neighbors had before the village opened was the behavior of residents. That was at 44%. And once that the village was actually open, that dropped to 29%. So seeing that the behaviors that they were worried about weren't actually playing out. That said, concerns about increases in trash, a big topic of conversation these days, was still an issue and a concern by neighbors.
The study also highlighted places where existing villages have fallen short, including making sure people have enough to eat.
Just under half of the villagers we surveyed were food insecure, suggesting that while villages are helping some individuals meet their basic needs for food, there's still work that needs to be done to ensure that everyone has access to food.
Researchers also found that existing villages serve a small number of residents who are Black, Indigenous, or other people of color. Those groups make up 40% of Multnomah County's homeless population, but only 17% of the village residents interviewed for this study.
Again, that was Pat Doris reporting from the story. If you'd like to see the story, you can catch it weeknights right here on KGW at 6 o'clock. And you can also check out the story on our KGW YouTube page. All right, let's get to the latest now on the war in Ukraine. We start with Russia, no longer a member of the Human Rights Council. The UN General Assembly voted today to suspend Russia because of its attacks on Ukraine. Ukraine proposed the resolution, and the U.S., the United Kingdom, and other UN members all expressed grave concern about those Russian activities in Ukraine. In all, 93 nations voted to expel Russia. Meanwhile, President Biden putting out new sanctions against Russia, sanctions that ban all new investments in Russia with increased penalties right now on large banks and state-owned properties. And these new sanctions also place members of President Vladimir Putin's family. They block them from using U.S. financial systems and also freezing any of their U.S. assets. The latest sanctions come in response to new accusations from Ukraine that the Russian army committed war crimes in their country. And finally, hundreds of Ukrainian families have started arriving here in the U.S. through the southern border. They entered crossing over the U.S.-Mexico border near San Diego. It's the first time that border crossing has been open in 2 years, although it's not clear yet if it will stay open. And that's a look at some of the latest headlines on the war in Ukraine.